Hi everyone, my name is Ira Fay, and this is a War of the Ring League game that I played back at the end of May against Gandalf, and this is for the 2021 League. And I thought it had a particularly interesting start to the game, and hope you'll enjoy it. Let's dive right in. So we are using action tokens. We decided to give the free people exactly one action token. I chose the muster action token, which lets you advance the political action token, which lets you advance one nation, one towards war. And you can see on the first roll of the game, my opponent allocated one eye and rolled no additional ones, and I rolled 4 character movement. So my first turn is going to be pretty straightforward. My opening cards are Guards the Citadel and Bilbo Song. I'm happy to see Guards of the Citadel. It's a great muster card, keeps Minas Tirith safe, and it makes me think, okay, maybe I can get Strider down there. I'm starting to think of that early game. Hopefully I can kill off Gandalf pretty quickly here, and then, move well with Strider. So we'll see what happens. I start off passing. My opponent gets Isengard toward war and then gets Saruman. Now, this is fine. I mean, I think it's totally fine to get Saruman, but if I happen to have Mirror of Galadriel in my hand, and I move, and I catch Gandalf, then I could theoretically move, let's say once or twice, and then use one character die to turn my last character die into a Will of the West and get Gandalf turn 1. So super minor, very low odds of both, catching Gandalf with only a single eye, and then also having Mirror of Galadriel in my hand. But unless you're planning on doing anything that, particularly matters for purposes of tempo, if for instance, if my opponent had Palantir of Orthanc, then this makes a lot of sense, right? Get Saruman early, use the character die, and then get to use the character die to play Palantir of Orthanc, and then the Palantir to be able to cycle extra cards. Great, that makes sense. But barring that, I think it makes sense to wait. Just in case. No reason to take that risk if you don't have to. All right. Anyway, it doesn't matter because I don't have Mirror of Galadriel in my hand, but it's just something to think about. Okay, I move. So my opponent would only hit me on a 6, and they roll a 6. So I get revealed for 1 corruption. I take 1 corruption because I don't want to lose Gandalf to a 1 this early on. I have plenty of character dice to hide again, so it's not like I need to use Strider's ability. And I didn't roll a Will of the West. If I had rolled a Will of the West, or if I had Mirror of Galadriel in hand, I might have lost Gandalf right now and gotten Gandalf turn 1, because that would be pretty incredible. But I don't have it. I didn't roll a Will of the West, so it's a moot point. Okay, but this is exactly the sort of thing that I was talking about possibly happening. Part of it did happen. Okay, one corruption, get revealed. Obviously not the best start for the Fellowship. My opponent draws a strategy card here, and that's interesting. That's fine. It's always good to draw strategy cards. They do useful things. But I think if I see that the Fellowship got revealed on the first move, I would feel a little inclined to draw character cards here, because now I know I can play them. All the cards that say play only when the Fellowship is not in a settlement, you can play those, and you can mess with the Fellowship. And particularly if I'm going to be as risky as to go over Moria, then it would be so great to reveal me, into Moria. Anything that just messes with the Fellowship, I think is particularly great. All right, so I hide, and my opponent moves some armies. Looks like they're coming towards Lorien. I think this can make sense, this early move. I don't know exactly what cards my opponent has. They used a password that's very common for them, so they didn't want to share it with me. But the point is they got to start to gather around Dimrildale, and that means maybe I'm not going to go through Moria, but I think it's perfectly fine. It does sort of encourage the Fellowship to go this way. So if they want the Fellowship to go the northern pass, the high pass route, then I think a move like this can encourage it. All right, so I hide, and then I move again. This is only going to hit me on a 5 or a 6, and my opponent rolls a 6 and gets an eye and reveals me again. So that's obviously not great. I had 4 character movement and against only a single eye, and got revealed hit twice and revealed twice. So I didn't even get 3 movement out of it. I just got 2 movement. And I took 1 more corruption because, again, same logic applies. I don't want to lose Gandalf to a 1. And I do have another character die to hide. I decide to go to Holland. Now, this is certainly risky because my opponent can put a unit on me, and it just slows the Fellowship down. I might get revealed into Moria. But my thinking is, and maybe this is flawed, I'd appreciate additional logic. My thinking is, I've already been revealed twice. At the start, I'm going to be able to hide with my last die. Next turn, I'm going to take a single movement. I can just move once, get to Moria, and then the turn after that, I can move again and get past Moria. Now, that is risky. My opponent could reveal me or do additional things, but they didn't draw a character card. And I'm not so worried about losing Gandalf early on because Saruman's in play. So I could get Gandalf fairly quickly. Since I haven't lost Gandalf yet, I kind of do want to lose him. Also, this keeps other things in play. Like if I get Fear Fire foes or something like that, I can separate, maybe get a random companion off into. I mean, I wouldn't take a random companion this early on, but I think I was thinking I wanted to have a faster path. I don't know. This is really probably the most questionable move of the entire game. Would you reveal into Holland or would you go high pass? I think it's risky to go into Holland. The one other thing I'll note is my opponent has an army movement that is a muster. So I don't mind if they're going to use this army movement to put a unit onto the Fellowship, then they're not using that to muster. And I'm happy for them to be slowed down a little bit with musters early on in the game. Okay, so I get revealed, obviously not great, and they get their armies moving to Moranon. It makes me think they're going to head up north with this army, and I hide. And then they use this army to get onto Holland, which I like. I mean, I like that. If I were the Shadow and Free is going to be as aggressive to go through Moria right there, then I want to at least try and punish them, reveal them into Moria, and see what I can do. So that makes sense to me. All right, I drew Dane Ironfoot's Guard, which is I'm always happy to see, particularly if this army is marching north. And Ents. Ents are not useful yet, but if I get Gandalf, then that'll be great. All right, they allocated 1 eye, rolled 1 more, and I got my Will of the West. So this is nice for me. I feel like it's pretty likely I'm going to be able to move. Maybe I'll even move twice if I don't get caught on my first try, and get to Dimril Dale and get Gandalf turn 2. Right, turn 2 Gandalf is great. So I'm feeling happy with my. I don't really mind this extra unit. Obviously, I don't want to take a lot of corruption, but I do want to lose Gandalf this turn if I can. All right, so I start off by moving, and I do get hit, and that extra unit was the one that hit me, so my opponent probably feels good about moving that in there, and I get an eye. So this is a 1. Now, look at the hunt pool right here. There are 4 tiles in here that do 0 damage, so either of the zeros or either of the eyes. And I'm debating now, do I want to lose Gandalf to a 1, or do I want to save Gandalf and lose him to a bigger number? Whatever is about to be drawn in Moria. So on average, there are 4 tiles that are worse, meaning 0, and I won't be able to lose Gandalf at all. There are 6 tiles that are better, any of the 2s or any of the 3s. So I have slightly better odds, and then the 1s are equal. So I have slightly better odds of losing Gandalf to a bigger number than a smaller number. And my thinking is, because I have already taken quite a lot of corruption hits, it makes sense to save Gandalf for a bigger number. And my odds are slightly in my favor to get a better number. So I'll wait. I only have a 4 out of, what is that? 13 chance. So a little worse, a little better than 1 out of 3, a little worse than 1 out of 3, less likely than 1 out of 3 to get a 0 and won't be able to lose Gandalf. So I decide to take my chances, see what I'm going to get. And with the extra tile, I get a 0. So I can't lose Gandalf at all. On one hand, not bad to get a reveal when you're already revealed. Not bad to get a 0, but I do kind of want to lose Gandalf while I have this Will of the West if I have the chance. So, that's not great. Okay. I don't know exactly what's better. Probably better to get the 0. Okay, so these armies continue moving on. I think that makes a lot of sense. My opponent's just making progress. Clearly, I'm eventually going to make it to Dimrill Dale. It'll be great to have this army there. I hide, and my opponent musters Sauron to war. That makes sense. And then I decide to use a ring to move the Fellowship a second time. And, I'm kind of hoping to get hit here, honestly, so that I can lose Gandalf and get a Will of the West. Now, it is risky. There are 5 tiles that reveal me, and then I'm going to get another tile out of Moria. So I don't know if this is right to use a ring up early, but I guess my feeling is if I can lose Gandalf, make progress, get out of Moria, and get Gandalf back this turn, that'll be good. What I'm particularly worried about if I stick around in Moria is my opponent can play cards like Orc Patrol, Isildur's Bane, or Falthing from the Deep. And then if they draw the 0, 1, or 2 reveal, I get revealed into a stronghold and they get to draw an extra tile for Moria without even me moving. While I'm at 0 movement, they reveal me, they get two for 1 tiles, and I have to hide again and move out, and they might even get another tile. So this is really what we're experiencing right here is the risk of this route. Like, I've moved the Fellowship 3 times and 4 tiles have been drawn already. Now, if there had been higher value numbers, I might have lost Gandalf already. I might have been moving slower, but at this point, I kind of want to keep going. So my opponent gets 2 rerolls because there's a unit there, and I'm in the stronghold, and they hit me on a 5 or a 6. So their chances of hitting me are quite high. All right, and they do hit me, and we get a 3. So I feel like, okay, like that was the 5th tile that was drawn. If any of the earlier tiles had been a 3 or probably even a 2, I would have lost Gandalf sooner. But my patience allows me to use Gandalf more efficiently. I don't know if that was right or not. Fortunately, I wasn't revealed. It would have been particularly sad to get revealed, but I wasn't revealed. Okay, so I lose Gandalf there. Clearly, that was my whole plan with using that ring. And 5 tiles had been drawn, and the Fellowship has moved 4 times. So that's a lot of tiles early on. I'm not feeling great about the Fellowship. I'm at 3 corruption, but I'm also not feeling horrible because I am making pretty steady progress. I am getting Gandalf turn 2, and I can sort of slow down my pace a little bit and do maybe a little more military defense. I have some cards that I can play, and even though a lot of tiles have come up, I haven't taken that much corruption yet. All right. So Gandalf shows up, these armies continue marching along, and my opponent plays, moves into there. I think that makes sense, and then plays the Palantir. So part of me wonders, I didn't know that they had the Palantir early on in the turn. I don't think they drew it in the middle of the turn. Part of me wonders, could they have played that sooner? And in particular, instead of moving this one army into Old Forest Road, was it better to play the Palantir of Orthanc and then use this Palantir? You would have gotten a free card draw out of it. Maybe they don't have any playable cards right now. I don't know because they didn't share their password with me. But I do wonder about that. If you have the Palantir of Orthanc, thinking about when to play it. Also, if they could have played it, this turn, even when I had a Will of the West out, I don't think I would have given up Gandalf to get rid of the Palantir. And honestly, if you can delay Gandalf by a turn, or possibly 2 or more, if I don't roll a Will of the West next turn, then, that's a great use of the Palantir. Make it difficult for the free people to get Gandalf. Okay. So as the free people player, I'm perfectly happy to see this here. I have 5 dice next turn. I already have Gandalf. I think it'll be, decent chances, better than 50% chance of rolling a Will of the West. And if I have to, I can use a second ring. All right, so I'm happy with all of my strategy cards: Guards of the Citadel, Dane Ironfoot's Guard, Éomer. These are all great cards. And Challenge of the King, could be good. Bilbo Song, I'm happy to see in Ents. And now that I have Gandalf and Fangorn, my Ents are active. So this is good. All right, opponent allocates 1 eye, rolls 2 more, and I did not roll the Will of the West. So I obviously wanted a Will of the West here to be able to get rid of the Palantir of Orthanc, and now I have a tough choice. Do I want to give my opponent a second ring to be able to get rid of the Palantir of Orthanc, such that they can't play a second, such that they can't draw cards from this Palantir? Now, I value rings pretty highly. I think the difference between having 0 rings and 1 ring for Shadow is quite big, because then if they get a bad roll, they can fix it or not. The difference between 1 ring and 2 rings for Shadow is a little smaller, but I also want to save my rings if I can, so that I can keep moving through Mordor pretty quickly, and if I eventually get to Mordor. And I'm also thinking, because my corruption was kind of high, I'm more inclined to maybe keep Strider in the Fellowship longer. I know, I drew Challenge of the King, I drew Guards of the Citadel, so if I get a Will of the West, maybe it does make sense to get Strider to Minas Tirith and crown him. But I've also drawn quite a few eyes already. I think 2 eyes have come out of the hunt pool already. Yeah, so 2 eyes have come out of the hunt pool already. So maybe if my opponent plays the red eye tile, maybe I bring, and the Fellowship manages to make it smoothly into Mordor, then maybe I bring Strider to Minas Tirith near the, as they approach. But I don't know that I'm bringing Strider out right away. We'll see what I roll. For now, at least it's a moot point, because I'm not bringing him out unless I roll a Will of the West. I'm not even going to risk that. All right, so the question primarily facing me right here is, do I get rid of the Palantir of Orthanc with a ring? I decide that it is not worth a ring. My opponent at most could get 2 card draws out of it if they use their ring. They're going to get 1 from this Palantir and maybe 1 from the ring if they have another card they really want to play. But otherwise, probably not. So that's the situation. Okay, sorry about that. So let's continue on. So I decide to muster, and I'm not exactly sure why I used a muster die instead of a Palantir die. I think I wanted to remain flexible. Maybe I want to be able to draw cards. I'm not sure. Would I rather mustering or would I rather Palantir? It's not exactly clear to me. I don't know. I don't know why. That's a little suspicious. Maybe I don't think that I'm playing Bilbo Song. Oh, maybe I'm thinking Ents. I wanna be able to threaten Ents. So if my opponent does decide to, muster, new power is rising, and then attack with these 2 dice, I still have Ents ready without using a character die. So okay, maybe I guess I was probably thinking about the option to play Ents, and I'm probably happy to use this Palantir to play Dane Ironfoot's Guard or Guards of the Citadel at some point. So, and also I will say, the fact that my opponent played the Palantir of Orthanc with a Palantir last turn and got their army into Old Forest Road, it did prevent me from using this army movement to block that movement in with a regular from Carrick, because often you'll move with half a movement. You'll move this army from Carrick into Old Forest Road. Now, because I don't have scouts, I don't think that move is quite as useful for me as free. But Shadow didn't know that I didn't have scouts, so I think it does make sense that they sort of pushed for Old Forest Road a bit. I play the other reason in terms of sequencing why I decided to use Éomer here is I want to get this army to Westamnet with a army movement. And then I can use a character movement if necessary to get into Helm's Deep. Now, my opponent probably isn't going straight for Helm's Deep this turn, but if I get these reinforcements, I want to be prepared. So that's why I start off with Éomer. All right, my opponent attacks Carrick. Now, that's a little surprising to me. I kind of expected them to go for Woodland Realm and Lorien, and get the elves to war instead of getting the north to war. I mean, obviously it's nice for them to get somebody to war so that they can get the Witch King. But I probably would have been more inclined to go for Lorien and Woodland Realm and leave the north far away from war. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know what cards they have in their hand. Amazingly, they managed to miss that unit in Carrick. I retreat to Northern Mirkwood, maybe with some idea of getting into Woodland Realm with either Dale or this guy, if they attack Dale. I go ahead and play Dane Ironfoot's Guard with a Palantir, so that sequencing didn't really matter. Now, I guess I'm still a little at risk of attacking into Helm's Deep, but my thinking is I'm going to have a little time. They're going to need to power up, at least with new powers rising or something. If they don't do that, then I'll hit them with the character die if I have to, with the Ents if they move out this turn. All right, so a lot of, in terms of what happens in Rohan, a lot of times what's happening is just, can you find the right time as Shadow? Can you find the right time to sneak in and do the attack? Or if you have to sacrifice Saruman, you sacrifice Saruman, but you want to try and time it at a point where Free People doesn't have the right dice to counter you. So as Free People, I'm trying to get my units in position first to be able to defend if I can. All right, so my opponent attacks Woodland Realm first as opposed to attacking Dale first, because if they attack Dale first, I would be able to just move this army unit in. So it's very rare that this army unit would survive. This is a weird situation, but they have to attack Woodland Realm to avoid letting that unit sneak in. So I think that makes sense. They do put the elves at war. They're still going to have an extra attack to be able to attack into Dale and then be able to muster the Witch King this turn. All right, I go ahead and move the Fellowship here. I'm not entirely sure why I did that as opposed to an army movement right here to delay the character movement. But I guess I'm thinking my opponent is putting the north to war, so I might as well move the Fellowship now. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure about the sequencing. Maybe there was some more interesting sequencing that could be done. The other thing to think about is after they attacked, and I should have mentioned this, immediately after they attacked Carrick, the elves were, the north was one away from war. At that moment, I could have considered using my token to muster the north all the way to war. And then I would have had this unit in Northern Mirkwood, Woodland Realm would have not been besieged yet, and Dale would have been open. And my opponent would have had a choice between attacking Dale to prevent me from mustering or attacking Woodland Realm. If they attack Woodland Realm, then I can muster into Dale. If they attack Dale, then I can move this unit into Woodland Realm. And my analysis of that was, yes, I could do that. That would let me either muster into Dale, which is nice to get an extra elite there, or the extra regular into Woodland Realm. I felt like the extra regular in Woodland Realm was not so valuable that it was worth giving up my token right here. And it does put the North to war, which is sort of doing Shadow's work for them because it lets them get the Witch King. So I guess my thinking was, I'm going to save this token for later. It's not that urgent. And I don't want to do Shadow's work for them getting nations to war. And one regular doesn't make that big of a difference. That was my analysis. Okay, so I decide to move, and my opponent misses this time, which is, I find hilarious because this was the time that they had the most dice to roll. They rolled 5 dice and they miss. Of course, it's only on a 6. So, that happens. That's not that less. It's a little bit better than a 50% chance they hit me, but not that much better on 6s. Okay. So my opponent plays Ulug High here, which is fine. They power up Dimral Dale. Interesting. I guess they're waiting to see if I'm going to move a second time or attack into Lothlorien, and they get to redraw a card because of Palantir. And again, they draw a shadow card. I mean, a strategy card. And yes, they do have strategy dice, but the Fellowship is out and about, so I don't know. I might consider drawing character cards here. All right, so I move again because... Why do I move again here? Why not do something with this army muster? I think this was a mistake, honestly. I think it probably makes sense to use my army muster here. I can wait to see if my opponent attacks into Lothlorien. I don't know that they would, but it sort of makes them think maybe I'll declare into Lothlorien. I probably wouldn't, but maybe I could. I guess my thinking here was I want to move again, because what else am I going to do with that character die? If I get revealed, then I want to be able to use Strider's ability to hide, and therefore I will use this die to hide. I think that's what I was thinking here. And maybe that's right. Maybe that's fair. It might have also been reasonable to just use my army movement first and then hide at the start of next turn. But okay, so that's what I did. And my opponent does hit me. That makes sense. And they get a 3. So if I'm really worried about corruption, then I think it could make sense to lose Strider here and take a guaranteed casualty. But things are early enough that... I'm not too worried about corruption. It's not great. I decided to take a random. I won't be sad. I won't be particularly sad if I lose Strider. But I get Boromir. So I'm okay with that. I take 1 and go up above Morgul Wound range of 3. So that's not bad. And then my opponent attacks Lothlorien here. And... I think that makes sense. They could choose to leave one person behind just to make sure I declare, but I don't think it makes any sense. They need to declare. And this is the downside of me moving again, that they didn't even have to leave somebody behind. So, maybe it would have made sense to wait. Now, what is interesting about this, I didn't expect this. By attacking Lothlorien here, they are not getting the Witch King this round. And I think that... I would be, on one hand, I do want to take Lothlorien out sooner rather than later, so that I don't have a chance, so that Free People doesn't have a chance to muster into there with the various muster cards or play power too great. But I also want to get the Witch King, because that's an extra die. So I might have felt more inclined to attack into Dale and then get the Witch King instead of attack Lothlorien right away. So, okay, so I go ahead and use my army movement. I want to get this army ready to get into Helm's Deep. I get Erebor fully prepared. So, I'm not particularly happy as Free People that Shadow managed to besiege both Lothlorien and Woodland Realm without any extra units in there. But I am pretty happy about my defensive Rohan and my defensive Erebor. Things are doing okay. I should have some amount of time with the Fellowship. All right, and then my opponent attacks Woodland Realm and defeats it in a single combat, which is not unreasonable, given that they played some cards. 2 leadership is a little low. I obviously would have preferred slightly more leadership, but it still got the job done, so that's fine. They did not get the Witch King, though, so that's 1 die different. All right, so my opponent allocates 1 eye. I declare the Fellowship. My opponent allocates 1 eye, and I get my Will of the West to be able to get rid of the Palantir. So, and my opponent rolled 3 Palantirs, so I'm happy to see the Will of the West. If I didn't see a Will of the West, I certainly would have spent a ring on this turn to avoid giving them 3 free cards. All right, so clearly Palantir goes away. That's obvious. Now, my opponent attacks Dale here. That's fine. Why not get the Witch King first? you know you want him, and then you get 2 extra rerolls. Maybe he's not coming up here. Maybe he's coming in Lorien. I don't know. I think I would muster the Witch King first. All right, my opponent gets a hit anyway, and takes over Dale, and goes up to 3 points. I go ahead and move the Fellowship, and while I could use the Will of the West, my opponent does not have the Southrons and Easterlings to war yet, and therefore there's no chance of Day Without Dawn to get rid of it. Now, I could have also considered separating Strider and then crowning him. But because my corruption got pretty high and I've been hit quite a few times, my thinking is I can just try and defend the territories I have, make do with 5 dice probably most of the game, and move twice. I don't want to give up 2 movements against 2 dice with no rerolls. It's, relatively safe. Now's a good time to move. I don't want to be spending these dice to get an extra future die. I want to spend them right now. And I'm thinking, like, I can see I'm 4 spaces away. So if I move twice this turn and I move twice next turn, then I'll make it in, and that's pretty good. The Challenge of the King, that does entice me towards separating Strider, and Guards of the Citadel makes me feel like he'd be pretty safe. But it just, I think, is probably not worth it because of the eye situation. I've already drawn 2 eyes, and so my chances of getting more are low enough that I think the benefit is probably not worth it. So that's why I decide I'm going to keep Strider in, at least for now. Also, if I had like a Palantir and one of the cards that separates a companion, and then I'm not giving up a 2 movement, I'm only giving up this single Will of the West, then maybe I'd be more enticed then. But given that I don't have that card and I didn't roll Palantir that would make it worth it, I'm not doing it. All right, so my opponent misses, which, they didn't have great chances with only 2 dice on 6s. And they turn a Palantir into a muster to get the Witch King. Now, that's fine, but if you have a die with the result that you want already, and you're not playing Lords of Middle-earth expansion, which has a card that can get rings back from Shadow, if you're just playing the base game, then I think it makes sense to use this die first and then save the ring for later. It'll be that much more of a surprise for the free people. Probably doesn't matter because they're probably just attacking with that. And I guess this is why they didn't bring the Witch King over to the Woodland Realm. Okay, so fair enough. I go ahead and move a second time before they get any Nazgul on me, and they miss. So that was close to a 50-50 chance on 5s with only 2 dice, but I am safe. So that was good. And my opponent plays Black Captain Commands. They get 2 more Nazgul. They're attacking Lorien with a full contingent. This is great. My opponent had quite a few Palantirs this turn, so this is a great example of using a Palantir, having cards in your hand that can help you balance out your roll if you get too many Palantirs. So this is a great use. Used a ring for one, used a good attack for another. Great. All right, so they attack Lorien. I played Daylight. I really like Riders of Theoden as a card, but I already have a good enough defense, I think, of Rohan. Feels already pretty good to me, and I've already made the movement out of Edoras. So, they played Shadow played a Shadow card, a strategy card, which can often increase attacks like this, like Deadly Strife. And so I felt like, if Lorien can hold out a decent amount, I don't want this army. Like, this army is going to defeat Lorien, but I want this army to be depleted at least a good amount to be able to I don't want them to just move on immediately onto Rohan. Yeah, so I don't know which card you would have played. I like that muster, but Sudden Strike doesn't do much. Heroic Death, yes, it helps, but I would prefer to save that for somebody like Gandalf, or in a battle that's going to be a little closer. So, all right, so Daylight was played there. It turned out to, I think, save a decent number of hits. But my opponent still gets 3 hits. I get 3 hits back. It is indeed Deadly Strife. My opponent presses, and then I go ahead and play Sudden Strike here because I guess I think I'm unlikely to draw more cards this turn, so might as well play something, and sort of decide I'm not going to get I'm probably not going to get Strider. I'm going to move twice, and that's that. I'm going to leave him in, so I sort of give up on this card. I do like it, but okay. Relentless Assault is interesting. They decide to I miss on Sudden Strike, and then my opponent decides to kill 1 unit and get 2 hits, and I get 1 hit back. And so, they took Lorien. It was a single die. That's obviously good for them. They're at 5 victory points on turn 4. And this army is, still, I think this is pretty fair amount of army left. I think this battle was pretty even, and they did spend a couple cards on it. So, but as free people, I'm like, okay, that's not great. I certainly am not happy that Shadow got 5 victory points by the middle of turn 4, but my remaining victory points are going to be kind of hard to get. And so I think Shadow should be thinking about, okay, where am I going for extra victory points? And I think free should be thinking about, where do I need to defend? Obviously, Helm's Deep is going to be potential real target. Erebor is pretty buff, and I can't really make it much buffer. And I'm happy with my Guards of the Citadel. I need to be careful, particularly careful of Dol Amroth. So as free people, this is like the number one target I'm thinking about. My opponent has been drawing strategy cards. I have a little bit of a saving grace, which is that the Southrons and Easterlings aren't at war yet. So I definitely need to be thinking about getting Gondor to war. I also need to, be careful of Rage of the Dunlendings or something like that. I think they just... No, they didn't. They didn't play Rage of the Dunlendings. So that's. I think let's just. Yeah. So Rage of the Dunlendings can get units to Rivendell pretty fast, but the elves are now at war, so I can muster in there and defend pretty well. All right. So my opponent draws another strategy card. They're trying to get Corsairs. I'm thinking I want to get Helm's Deep ready. So Helm's Deep is now totally ready, and my opponent now moves in with these Nazgul, and it's unfortunate because, well, not unfortunate. I can declare these. There's 2 movement here, so it's not particularly worrisome. And I muster Gondor because, again, I'm thinking I better be worried about Corsairs of Umbar coming at some point. I don't want Dol Amroth to be taken unawares. All right, so they move along, and I guess this army is coming in. I don't know exactly how this army is going to besiege this army. I mean, maybe I would fight, maybe I wouldn't. Another kind of funny thing that I can think about is Eagles are coming. Oh no, I can't play Eagles. Eagles are coming because it has to be an army containing a companion. It's not just a companion by themselves. All right. All right, so I declare the Fellowship. I think about Osgiliath, but I want to make it a little bit harder for them to put somebody on the Fellowship when I'm 1 away in case I get revealed. And so I go to Eastern Emyn and I decide that, I'm not, the idea of this would be if I got took a random companion, but and get a Hobbit, then the Hobbit could come to Minas Tirith or something like that. But I'm not so worried about that. I would rather avoid the rerolls going into Mordor. All right, so my opponent allocates an eye and gets 4 eyes, 2 more, and I get this pretty nice roll. I just drew Celeborn's Galadrim, so obviously a little late for Lorien. That's too bad, and now I have 2 end cards. So given the battles that may be happening in Rohan, I'm happy to see 2 end cards, and maybe my opponent is going to do something like try and sneak into Minas Tirith. Maybe like this army comes to Druiden Forest, and then this army does the move 3 move to get to Druiden Forest, and then they besiege Minas Tirith. And at that point, I'm really happy. Like, I hope that they try that because I will have Guards of the Citadel. So I'm sort of intentionally leaving this looking potentially slightly tasty. I'm not going to muster Gondor towards war, at least right now, until I see the Southrons and Easterlings getting close to war, and Umbar. Though I do want to get Gondor to war sooner rather than later, so that I can muster some units into Dol Amroth. All right. So, and my expectation, if you think about it, last turn I moved twice. This turn I should be able to move twice. So I'm feeling relatively good, even against Four Eyes. All right. So I start off by moving because, I know that I want to. Maybe they're going to put a Nazgul on me. I don't think there's any reason to wait. So there we go. So I move, and with 4 dice, they hit me. That's pretty close to 50% chance. And then they reveal me again. And so that was actually a completely 50-50 chance to reveal me once I've been hit. And I take 1. So with 1 damage, I don't think I want to risk losing Strider. So I just take 1. Now, I don't want my corruption to go too high, particularly given that Isildur's Bane hasn't been played yet. But at the same time, I'm just revealed. I really don't want to lose Strider to a 1. So take the 1. Okay, my opponent... And, by the way, my opponent has not been drawing character cards, or particularly cycling character cards, very much this game. So, on one hand, I think maybe they have Cruel Weather already. But they also don't seem to have cards to punish me, right? They're not playing any of the Fellowship as Revealed cards, Morgul Wound, or the extra tile drawing cards. There are a bunch of things that they could be playing here that they're not. And so I think that's a little bit of a consequence. All right, so they move, and now Umbar, right? These units are in Umbar. I'm certainly worried about Corsairs. All right, so at this point, I'm thinking, does it make sense to hide the Fellowship? I mean, I think I definitely want to hide the Fellowship. The question is, do I want to do it with a character die and then move with this last Will of the West or not? And I think I decide I want to save this muster for mustering up Gondor. And therefore, this Palantir is going to be a little less useful. Because the Southrons and Easterlings are not at war yet, I have a little bit of time. Oh, I'm not worried about Day Without Dawn. That's what I was going to say. Because... I don't know if you can hear the fire engine outside. Because the Southrons and Easterlings are not at war, I'm not worried about Day Without Dawn, and therefore I can safely save this Will of the West to do as I please with, depending on what I need. So maybe I'm going to use it to muster up units in Dol Amroth. Maybe I'm going to use it to play Ents if some attack is happening here. And so I guess we'll see. It gives me flexibility. I'm happy that Southrons and Easterlings are not at war yet. And by the way, this is, if you think all the way back to turn 1, when my opponent used that army muster to move into Holland, instead of mustering once, then whatever normal muster would be, getting somebody to war, there can be these consequences this far along into the game. And I don't think it was wrong to put a unit in Holland, but I do think this is there are choices. There are real choices that people make. And what's a little strange about that is, if you are going to slow down your military a little bit, you are going to mess with the Fellowship, which totally makes sense. Why aren't you also drawing some character cards? That just, it feels a little like can't quite make up your mind. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's not right. Maybe I'd put somebody in Holland no matter what. That didn't cost much. All right. So Worn with Sorrow and Toil here. Now that I'm hidden, I'm going to move again. Worn with Sorrow and Toil makes a lot of sense. I still have 3 companions plus 2 hobbits in the Fellowship, so that's great. Now, this is a situation where the power of the action tokens makes a lot of sense, and I want to highlight this right here. This is an important moment. So what's happening is, because I'm using an action token here, I am going to get to take the last action this round. I just muster Gondor toward war because that's what I want to be doing anyway. I'm going to have this muster to be able to actually put a unit into Dol Amroth. And most significantly, my opponent has to go first. So that means on the very last action of this round, I'm going to move with the Fellowship. And then even if they have Cruel Weather, they're not going to be able to play it because I'm going to have the last action. And so I'm completely safe from Cruel Weather right here because I'm at 0 movement. Now, if I hadn't been revealed, on my first move, then I'd still be able to be hit with Cruel Weather. But because I got revealed and I'm at 0 movement right now, Cruel Weather is unplayable. Cruel Weather is only playable if I'm at more than 1 movement. Nazgul Strike, also unplayable. Nazgul Search, also unplayable. So if you have an action token and you can save it for this round where you're getting into Mordor, that's a great round to use it and to go last. So you get the same number of dice as you just pass as long as you need. And so you have the same number of dice as Shadow. And then you use your action token. And then from then on, you're taking the last action. All right, so my opponent goes ahead and musters units into Isengard. So that's strange to me. Why are we mustering 3 units here instead of just getting 2 elites in Orthanc if we're going to attack into Helm's Deep? It makes me think there's Rage of the Dunlendings coming. Maybe the Shire is going to be attacked. I'm now thinking, oh, I better be considering mustering the Shire, maybe muster here. But yeah, I think it's a decent plan for my opponent to be trying to take Edoras, trying to take Pelargir, trying to take the Shire. But the North is at war, so I can start to muster up the Shire. Think about that. So... But even so, let's say my opponent takes the Shire. That's 1. Edoras, that's 2. Pelargir, that's 3. That gets them to 8 victory points. They still need some stronghold, some other stronghold. So that's probably not Rivendell if they're going after the Shire. Erebor is looking pretty buff. Helm's Deep is pretty buff, particularly with Ents. Minas Tirith, I know, can be pretty buff. And I'm going to get Gondor to war, so I'm going to start mustering up Dol Amroth. So, cities are definitely a good thing for me to be aware of. But it's still going to be a little tricky for them to get to 10. All right. So I muster into Dol Amroth. I want to make sure that is a pretty hardened target so they can't get it. But part of me is thinking with that muster, I don't know. I can't see their cards, so I don't know exactly what they're doing. But part of me would be maybe getting Southrons and Easterlings to war if I have Corsairs of Umbar. And if not, then getting 2 elites in Orthanc might be more appealing. Okay, so they go ahead and attack the Fords of Isen out of Orthanc, and then they manage to miss. And again, if you had gotten 2 elites, you would have had 2 more leadership and also an additional hit point on top of that. And now I have an interesting situation. So I could have retreated to Gandalf into Fangorn, and then I could have used this Will of the West to move to Parth Celebrant and then get into Lorien at the start of the next turn and save Lorien. So that's interesting. It's risky, though, because obviously my opponent can attack right into Fangorn. If I had scouts in my hand, I might have considered that. I really might have considered that. Then it does risk Swarm of Bats. And more importantly, I want to make sure the Fellowship gets in this round. Like, it's not worth 2 dice. Like, it is good to free Lorien, but at the same time, it's also good to get into Mordor when I can. So, this is unlikely. I think it's really unlikely that that this unit survives. Once this unit does survive, where should it go? I think getting in the way of this army moving in. I guess they're trying to move this army in and this army in. Maybe they have the move an army 2 spaces, and so they're going to do this, and then they're going to move 2. Maybe this army is going to move into Dale, and they'll try and take Erebor. So not crazy, but it does risk Ents. So they decide to move in 4 hit points and leave 2 in Orthanc. And I think that just doesn't make a lot of sense. I think if you're going to bother to do this attack, move in all 5 or leave at least 4 hit points behind so that I need 2 Ent cards to be able to take out Orthanc. I've only drawn 5 character cards, so the odds of me having 2 Ents are pretty low. I don't know exactly what they are, but they're low. I do happen to have 2. But the odds of me having 1 aren't bad. Like, I think I could easily have 1, and then you're risking Saruman. So, and I have a card to do it. I have a die to do it right here. So, yeah. All right. I think this was probably Shadow's biggest mistake. I don't really understand why they did that in terms of the number of. If you're willing to give up Saruman, fine, give up Saruman. Don't waste these 2 units. Bring them into Fordsweisen. Okay, so I do have Ents, and I play the one that I had a choice. Do I want to play the one first? Which do I care about less? The one that reduces them to 2 dice, or the one that does 2 extra hits? I like saving the ones. I like the one that does 2 extra hits more, because these armies just don't seem that big. So I'd rather just dish out some damage back at them, and then they won't be able to as easily take over Helm's Deep. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. Let's see what I roll. I do manage to actually get 3 hits and take out Orthanc on my first try. I had a second end card ready to go, but this way I'll get to save it for a combat effect, assuming I don't lose it to Worn with Sorrow and Toil. And I definitely want to play these character cards now before possibly losing somebody to Worn with Sorrow and Toil. And so I play Bilbo's Song here, because the Ent cards let you play a second card if you have Gandalf and Fangorn, and so I play a second character card. Might as well play Bilbo's Song now. I'm never going to hold on to it long enough to get down to Gollum. So, or Smeagol. So, I guess Gollum. So anyway, makes sense to play it now, heal my 1 corruption. So I'm very happy with this play. Got to remove a die from Shadow, got to kill 2 units, got to heal 1 corruption. Feel great about that. All right. Now my opponent attacks Erebor. Now I think for a while, is it worth trying to go to war and, or not go to war, but maybe try and take this back. If they survive, I can muster up and take Dale and take Woodland Realm. But then I realize, oh, right, the dwarves are really far from war. So definitely makes sense to go into a siege here. And I do. And now I'm thinking, okay, my opponent can play the move 2 armies 2. This army goes to Fords of Isen. This army goes to Erebor. Okay, they're, making some progress. It seems like they're not really going for the cities option, but maybe they still are. All right. So, and I moved and I got missed. So that roll, with 4 dice on 5s, missed me. Now, if they had hit, I would have had less than 50% chance of getting revealed. So, but it's obviously nice to get into Mordor while hidden without taking corruption. So maybe that balances out a little bit of the luck from the early game. But obviously that's great for me, and a little bit of bad luck for Shadow there. Okay. I draw Athelas, which I love to see when Strider is Guide, particularly when I have a decent amount of corruption built up. So that's just an awesome draw. And I'm feeling pretty good about my defense. I mean, I think Erebor should be able to hold for a while. And as long as I can destroy the ring in 2 turns, then I should be okay. So I'm glad to have these 2 rings. I will move, try and use Strider's ability to hide, see what I can do. All right, so my opponent allocates 1 eye. And there's some argument for allocating more, but I think if you allocate too many eyes, then, that you have some chances of getting them, but you might not. And there are no red tiles in here, so I'm feeling relatively good about this pool, particularly with only 1 eye. All right, so I get 2 movement, and I still don't have. My opponent still doesn't have the Southrons and Easterlings to war, so I'm still not worried about Day Without Dawn. So I start off by playing Athelas first, because when I move, I want to be able to lose companions if I need to, and therefore I don't want to potentially lose Athelas to Worn with Sorrow and Toil. So I have time to play this because the Southrons and Easterlings are not at war. If they were at war, I would have moved, most likely, with one of the Wills of the West, and then, if I lost a companion, hope that Athelas didn't get hit, or maybe take more corruption and not even risk losing Athelas on that one, depending on how big the corruption hit is. Okay, so I get to heal 2 corruption. That's obviously good. That's average. It's exactly what you'd expect with Strider as guide for Athelos, but healing 2 corruption is big. So I'm feeling much better, than I was back when I was in Dimril Dale and there had been 5 tiles drawn. But because I got some safe movements around here, and because I avoided any nastiness getting into Mordor, this size fellowship moving along with this pool, there are no red tiles in there, I'm feeling okay. So I've managed to play 2 healing cards, and my opponent has played no direct damage cards. Worn with Sorrow and Toil, messes with my healing, but I've been able to play around that pretty well. Okay, Strider, I'm feeling very happy with. My opponent gets the Southrons and Easterlings closer to war, and at this point, I want to make sure I use my Wills of the West so that when the Southrons and Easterlings actually get to war, I will be able to not have any sitting out there to be taken. All right, so I move along. 1 corruption, no reveal, basically the most pleasant tile there could be. I mean, really, there's nothing better than that, I would say. The 0 reveal honestly probably isn't even better because I'd have to spend an extra die to hide. Maybe the 0 reveal is better, but that's a very pleasant one. Okay, so I take my 1 corruption. I'm fine with that. I'm not going to risk losing Strider or any of these big guys to that. And I kind of want to save, to the extent that I can, I want to save Nameless Wood and Heroic Death to possibly deal with some of these battles that might be happening in Rohan. So, and I would lose them to Worn with Sorrow and Toil. So that's why I'm happy to take the 1 corruption. All right, my opponent attacks Westamnet, and there's no card that's useful to play. I want to save these good combat cards for the big battles. My opponent plays Onslaught here just to cycle a card because it's no longer playable as an event because Saruman isn't in play. So my opponent manages to miss on 5s with 10 dice. So this guy is like some super elite fighter. And he manages to survive the Battle of Fords of Isen, manages to survive in Westamnet, and now Rohan is at war. So this is a moment that I have a chance to muster. Think for a moment, where would you muster? You're probably using this Will of the West to move the Fellowship. If you get caught, you probably want to use something to hide. And if you get revealed, you want to use something to hide with Strider. And where do you muster? So I decided this is a moment that I can muster before these things get besieged or attacked. I decide to muster a leader here and a leader in Helm's Deep. Now, I don't know what I was thinking. I don't think that actually makes sense. I think it makes sense to put an elite into Dol Amroth, because that way, if my opponent gets the Southrons and Easterlings to war and then plays Corsairs, I have that elite in there. If I had Imrahil of Dol Amroth, or if I had Círdan's ships, then fine, get the extra leader in there. But given that I don't have that in hand, I think it makes more sense to put the elite in right away, or possibly put an elite into Edoras so that they can stick around and fold and just continue to cause trouble. So, maybe this looks like a bluff, like I have Imrahil of Dol Amroth, but since I don't have it, I would probably rather not bluff that. I don't know. My opponent does have a little bit of a tricky situation because they want to get the Mouth of Sauron this round, but they also want to get the Southrons and Easterlings to war. So I don't know. It's a little bit of a tricky call what they're going to do. I'm hoping at this point, having spent that muster, that they will not get the Southrons and Easterlings to war and they'll choose to get the Mouth of Sauron instead. All right. It seems pretty hard for my opponent to get enough victory points. Maybe Pelargir they could get in 2. Then they could get to Edoras is 3 attacks. Rage of the Dunlendings is 4, 5, 6. They just don't have enough dice plus 1 stronghold. They don't have enough dice to win this turn. So they really should be thinking about next turn. So I think it probably makes sense to use the army muster to get the Mouth of Sauron for them. That's what I'm anticipating. All right. And then they hope that I won't roll enough Enough actions. All right, so the other thing that I'm thinking is I only have 5 dice next turn. I want to make sure, if possible, that I can destroy the ring next turn. I really want to. So I might want to think about using a ring to move a 3rd time this turn if I don't get revealed on this action. All right. So, and honestly, maybe I shouldn't have even spent that muster at all, and instead saved it for a ring, so I could move, hide with a die, and then move with a ring. That might have been better instead of this muster. All right. So my opponent, we pause the game, and then we reload, and my opponent decides to attack Edoras. And that guy is finally defeated with a Deadly Strife. So I'm not sure that I would have spent a Deadly Strife on that, but I guess you want to redraw it. That's fine. So my opponent goes up to 6 victory points. And Shadows on the Misty Mountains makes sense. I guess this again makes me think we're going to get a Rage of the Dunlendings, maybe try and take Rivendell. So I need to be thinking about that. They can get pretty close to besieging Rivendell. So Rage of the Dunlendings to here, and then move, and then attack. Yeah, so they can do all that this turn if they're willing to do without the Mouth of Sauron. You know, again, I'm sort of regretting that muster. That wasn't probably the most efficient muster. I probably should have waited a little bit longer to see what they were going to do. If they muster the Southrons and Easterlings to war, then I put the elite into Dol Amroth. Otherwise, I could move and then continue to see what happens. But I guess I wanted to wait to do my movement so that I could hold on to these cards. But yeah, I don't know exactly what was right there. All right, so my opponent merges up, and what's interesting is I kept expecting to see the move 2 card, but they didn't play it. They never did it. So they got this army. This army is going to have a tough time fighting this army, I think. And I'm also thinking, could I get Gandalf in here? If I can get Gandalf in here with Heroic Death and canceling all of this leadership, that's going to make this army really hard to beat. But my thinking is, I think my army is still, this is going to be good enough, particularly if I have Ent cards, and Gondor can probably hold out. I don't think it's that easy for them to get to 10 victory points. And if I just keep moving, and this pool is not that bad for me, so if I just keep moving, then that's a good solution. So I move, I get an eye, that's 2 damage, and I don't want to lose Strider here, but I also don't want to go too high on corruption. So I'm assuming I take a random here. And nope. Okay, so that's interesting. So I decided to, yeah, maybe that's right. So I decided to not take a random here because I didn't want to lose Nameless Wood or Heroic Death, because those are powerful combat cards, particularly if there's a battle happening in Rohan. And I want to make sure that I can use Strider's ability to hide. So because of the healing that I managed to do, I feel comfortable going up to 5 corruption. That's probably reasonable of me. All right, and now I know for sure I'm going to get to be able to hide. And I keep thinking, okay, maybe my opponent's going to have some nasty character cards to play on me, but they don't. So they attack Helm's Deep, and I use the Strider's ability to hide. So Strider has managed to hide quite a few times. Thank you, Strider, and the Athelos. Strider's been doing well. And then my opponent gets the Mouth, which makes sense. That's what we expected. All right, so next round, I get some scouts. There and back again. Not useful for me, so I'm not sure why. Interesting. So I got rid of scouts because I want to have an extra character card. Both scouts and there and back again are useless cards for purposes of their card effect. So I'm just looking at the combat effect. I think scouts and brave stand are both fairly useless combat effects, and so I keep the extra character card as buffer against Worn with Sorrow and Toil, so that maybe that one will get discarded instead of my more useful Nameless Wood and Heroic Death. I think that's what I was thinking there. All right, so my opponent allocates an eye and rolls 2 more, and I get enough movement that this should let me destroy the ring this round. And that is important. So I guess that was the other reason that was worth keeping Strider around. It's just one fewer chance of losing Strider and make sure that I can hide. So yeah, that was definitely right to keep Strider and go up to 5 corruption. Even against Isildur's Bane that draws a 3, I'm still okay. All right, so I start off by moving right away. I don't need to spend the Will of the West yet because the Southrons and Easterlings are not at war. But maybe I should have, because if this move happens and I get revealed, then my opponent gets the Southrons and Easterlings to war. I won't have the chance to hide with a non-Will of the West die and move right away. So even though my opponent doesn't have Southrons and Easterlings to war yet, it might make sense to have used the Will of the West in anticipation of that to make sure I can destroy the ring this round. All right, so I get revealed for 0 corruption. Strider is going to do even more work. And my opponent musters an elite in Orthanc. And, that's okay. Again, I'm thinking, okay, they're going to do the double movement now to reinforce this. Fine. I hide right away because I realized my mistake. The other thing that can happen is if they get the Southrons and Easterlings to war, I need to consider mustering a unit into Dol Amroth so that they can do all that. So for all those reasons, it would have been better to use the Will of the West early. All right, they try and play Day Without Dawn now. So they actually had Day Without Dawn in their hand. Instead of mustering Orthanc, they could have instead done this. I guess they didn't. They forgot that the Southrons and Easterlings aren't at war yet. So they thought they could play this as soon as I hid, but they didn't. Yeah, so that's an unfortunate mistake. If they had realized that, so we both made mistakes. I made a mistake not using it first. They made a mistake by thinking they could play it. So, all right. So now at this point, what do? They realize that basically they can't stop me. There's just not enough corruption that can be dealt. I can move once no matter what it is. I'll take the corruption, even if they have Isildur's Bane. Oh, right. And the other thing is they only had 1 Palantir. So, and no rings. So I knew they couldn't inflict that much corruption on the Fellowship. All right. So they go ahead and play Monsters Roused. I move. I get a 1. Strider hides again. So Strider has now hidden 3 times in Mordor. They get some armies together and they besiege Rivendell with this silly army, and they attack but can't defeat it. I mean, it doesn't really matter at this point because we know for sure that I can destroy the ring, and they wanted to play out the battles, so why not? I say, okay, let's see what happens in the Helm's Deep battle, and I play because I want to play my Ents, and I play Nameless Wood and do some damage, quite a lot of damage, and that's the end of the game. So this is a good reminder that the tides can turn on the hunt, and also that if you do reveal the Fellowship early, you might want to pressure them more with more character cards. The Fellowship ended, if I had used all of these companions efficiently, I actually have 9 corruption worth of companions in here. So, I effectively was at 2 corruption. So I don't know that you could do 9 corruption worth of damage, but some red tiles in there, some extra reveals. I will say it was quite significant that I was able to get into Mordor without anything bad being played on the Fellowship. So that is significant to think about. If you have action tokens, make sure that you can seriously consider saving them. Let's look at statistics for a second. So my opponent was average on 6s, -8 on 5s. So that only mattered for the times they were attacking in Carrick and Eastonmet. Pretty average here. Had a good number of army musters. I was slightly fast, but Strider did a lot of work hiding quite a few times. The Athelos, Strider was certainly MVP. And then losing Gandalf early and getting Gandalf on turn 2 allowed me to destroy the ring on turn 7. All those extra dice let me get there on turn 7. So that's the game. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have suggestions or comments, please leave them below, and hope you have a good rest of the day.